Children being mutilated in a family-oriented community devastated a small town in Germany. An animal that wore sheep's clothing hid amongst the residents while preying upon their young. Let's find out together how this was able to take place there. This channel is about lesser known serial killers. If you're interested, I upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. Well, if you're ready, let's get started. (1898) in the country of Germany and in a rural part called Osnabrück. The area was a quiet, safe community where the residents knew and helped one another. One day, two young 7-year-old girls who happened to be neighbors lived on the outskirts of town. They were both at their homes preparing to take the long walk to school together. Their mothers gave them their instructions on being careful while walking to school and to be on their best behavior in class. The children would first meet up and then take the journey together daily. After giving their goodbyes, the children scurried off in the direction towards school that morning. When lunchtime came, the children were expected to return home to eat as they normally did. After some time passed, the parents became worried because this was not like them to not be on time. So they both went to town and checked by the school, only to find out that the two children never arrived to school that morning. Both parents, now panicked, immediately notified their husbands and requested the help of the locals to help find their children. After searching all the town's buildings, the community residents decided to widen their search patterns, focusing on the surrounding forest. After an extensive search, both children were located several yards apart from one another and savagely murdered. The killer had stripped each child of their clothing and allegedly assaulted them. The killer then cut off each of their limbs with an unknown object. Then afterwards, the savage killer decided to desecrate the children's body one last time by taking each extremity and then tossing them in separate directions away from each victim's body. The police arrived and questioned all the residents in the community. Several came forward and stated earlier that day that they saw the local carpenter wandering in the vicinity where the children's bodies were found. That man was identified as Ludwig Tesnau. The police located him and brought him in for questioning. The clothing he wore was found to be covered in deep red blotches that resembled bloodstains. When questioned, he pled his innocence and stated that the color was due to wood dye that he had been utilizing that same day. At that time, there was no test that could be administered to determine if that was human blood or not. So without any witnesses to the crime, Ludwig was released from custody. The case remained unsolved at that time. 2 years later, in a nearby town of Gorin, two brothers ages 6 and 8 notified their parents of their intentions to play in a nearby neighborhood. The parents allowed them to go with instructions to be back in time for supper. Several hours later, the children had not returned home, and obviously, this made the parents worried. The parents then notified the authorities and requested assistance from the community in searching for their children. A neighbor found the two still warm bodies shortly thereafter. Each child had been killed with a stone. Both of their heads had been bashed repeatedly into an unrecognizable pulp. Much like the two previous homicides, the killer cut off each extremity from the two boys and tossed them in separate directions. Each child had been stabbed multiple times in their abdomens, along with almost cutting off one of the children's heads. Residents of the nearby town observed a strange man in the vicinity where the children's bodies were found earlier that day, and again, that man was identified as Ludwig Tesnau. He was located by the authorities and brought in for questioning again. His clothing were covered in red blotches, but this time his shirt was also missing a button. The authorities found a button matching his shirt near one of the bodies. Science had progressed a little bit since the first two murders, and they now had a way of testing the blotches on his shirt to see if it was human blood. His clothing was tested and it came back as positive. They also checked his home and found blood-stained boots under his sink. A local farmer notified the authorities that he caught Ludwig prior to the murder of the two boys on his property, killing his sheep. Ludwig had taken a hatchet and dismembered 7 of his livestock. Ludwig continued to plead for his innocence, but he was ultimately charged, found guilty, and given the death sentence. If you enjoy more stories such as these, I'll upload new content every Tuesday and Thursday. God bless and stay safe.